It's our last New York Fashion Week discussion, and we're talking about the Marc Jacobs show, so it's a brilliant show to end on. And I also have a brilliant set of panellists with me who will introduce themselves.
I'm Verity Parker, I'm a stylist and fashion editor at luxup.com.
I'm Camilla Morton, I'm a writer and I'm the author of How to Walk in High Heels.
I'm Davies, fashion features editor of Dating Enthused.
I'm Butchart, I'm a fashion historian and a lecturer at London College of Fashion.
It's a really nice mix, I'm very honoured. So tell me, what makes Marc Jacobs so great? Because it's, let's face it, it's one of the only shows that people actually look forward to in New York.
Well, it has always been and is consistently a highlight, and it's sort of one of the shows that you can hook where fashion is going. I think it's always really a pivotal show, and it was always, when it was at the beginning, it was always the one that you thought, right, once I've seen Marc Jacobs, I kind of know what direction the season's going in. And I actually think it's quite nice that it's the sort of finale of New York this time and leads into London, because you can kind of consolidate all the ideas that you've seen coming through, and if they are sort of filtering into what his vision is, it tends to make it all make a little bit more sense.
We've talked on other panels when people mention what they're looking forward to in New York, that Marc always does this thing where he kind of flips New York on its head. You know, you get the idea there's a sort of feeling for the season, and then he'll always do something and push it. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like Camilla was saying, it does that sort of thing where it just sort of, you think you know exactly where it's going, and then he does do that amazing thing that you almost only really see a few times in London and then Paris and Milan, but actually he's brought it together a bit, you know, in advance, which is nice, gives you an idea.
Also, there's so much kind of theatre often with his shows as well that you don't always associate with, like the New York collections. And I think that's really nice. It just injects a real sense of fun into the week.
I wanted to ask about that, this idea of the show as, you know, a piece of theatre, because we've mentioned this in some of our other panels. Some people have been like when we talked about Victoria Beckham, people were quite like, it's really refreshing, you know, to see a show that is just about the clothes, it's really edited, it's really concise. And we kind of came up with this idea that there's kind of three types of shows now. There's the one that's just about the clothes, there's the one that's made for the internet, you know, it's all about the streaming, and then there's one that's made for the people there. And I think what's quite interesting with Marc is it does seem to, he kind of manages to do all three.
Definitely.
Yeah. Can you tell, because I know this is your area of expertise, can you tell me a bit about this idea of like the show as theatre and as a piece of kind of...
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that this morning on my way here, and about how it is kind of the idea of creating some kind of spectacle around it. It's kind of, it works really well for press, and it works really well for the people there, obviously, and people watching it on the internet. But it doesn't actually work so well for the buyers if you're kind of, you know, doing, you know, crazy things with lights, or, you know, it is kind of distracting. So it is like it's become a sort of a sort of exercise in branding and creating more sort of theatrics around the brand, and I think that's what it's kind of really become. I mean, the catwalk show, in terms of its evolution, it started off, you know, kind of in ateliers, like, I mean, obviously Charles Worth, and then kind of was picked up by Poiret and you know, even Chanel, but it was always kind of very much within the atelier. It was very much a kind of industry thing, and I mean, today, I mean, there's just so much imagery, there's so much saturation of fashion imagery everywhere, that it has to be more than just about the clothes. So that sounds kind of crazy, but it has to be spectacle, and it has to be theatrics, I think.
You know, at a time where there's so many shows, you know, you have to stand out in some way, kind of align yourself to some kind of bigger ideal and vision, otherwise it's a bit pointless.
I was going to ask you that actually, because as we were saying, Paul, we cover a lot of shows, and when you're a writer, do you actually appreciate it when you go somewhere and someone's, you know, put their vision out there in such an obvious way? Do you actually enjoy it because you can go home and write about, you know, the set and the music and stuff?
Totally. I really love it to be like an immersive experience. I'm always obsessed with what's on the soundtrack for me, and it's really important. I mean, otherwise it's just clothes, isn't it?
It's great. You know? We work in fashion and we're like, just clothes. So boring.
You know, there's a massive difference between fashion and clothes.
And it's the experience.
But also, when you look at catwalk pictures, when you just look at a still shot that is just a one-dimensional face shot, you can't get all the emotion and the swing of the coat and how it moves and how it
the
feels.
fabrics and things like that. And that's something you request looks, and they come and it's something completely different.
You know, where the flash pops off, it sort of changes it. And I think it's, you know, I think that shows do need to have a sort of element of spectacle or sort of like trigger in your brain, or else it just becomes like this long conveyor belt of endless monotony of tweeds, of pencil skirts, of this, of that, and you could be doing some sort of like blankety blank game show, and you just need something to stand out, or else.
And it changes your ideas as well about the way you think about the season when you are physically there and you note those little fabrics and the intricate details in the hair and makeup much more in person. It really
when
makes
you have
difference
an emotional connection to it,
how you see the season going forward.
Yeah. We're kind of touching on this with this idea of something that's a bit of a spectacle, but I want to talk a bit about kind of wit in fashion, because we mentioned this a lot obviously with our Jeremy Scott panel, but we were talking about who does kind of bad taste, who does something funny really well, and Marc Jacobs came up, and it got me thinking about, is that one of the things that actually makes him so successful, is that ability to be a little bit, you know, subversive and a little bit tongue-in-cheek.
But it's all in good taste, isn't it? That's the thing, is that it's so immaculate when you actually look at his clothes and the finishing and the fabrics and everything. It is so immaculately done and so clever.
I think it's all a question of referencing as well, because it depends what you're kind of looking at and the way it's executed. Like someone like Marc Jacobs does it kind of flawlessly. You know, if you look back to when he was doing the Perry Ellis Grunge collection, which is, you know, seminal. You know, taking that kind of reference, but then making those really beautiful clothes from it.
And it's always very precise. You know, he goes, like everyone sort of talked about last season, because obviously that was such a clear visual message there, because it was so sort of the monochrome and the striking and the way they'd done all their hair and everything like that. But I think the fact that he can pinpoint it to such a clear vision is
but also he's always so yin and yang, like as he was so graphic and monochrome and striped last season, this season you know it will be a total flip on the head. And I think he is an extraordinary talent, that he does have the sort of strength of vision to be able to flip it on his head each year, and I think that's why he does dominate as much as he does, because he has such clarity of vision that
it's confidence as well, isn't it? Thinking that I can do this, and actually this isn't expected, and I'm going to go with it, and it will be a success.
I think the day a Marc Jacobs show is what you expect is a real pity.
It's the end of fashion. I do want to look at the clothes, but I want to ask one more thing, because you did touch on it, and I'm quite interested by this, which is him as a man and this idea of the designer as, you know, a personality and putting themselves into their brand. Because with Marc Jacobs, you know, it's so much about him as a personality, whether it's him being in his fragrance campaign or just the way he kind of has come to dominate fashion by being so outlandish and eccentric. Do you think that's...
I don't think he's that eccentric, actually. I don't think he seems that eccentric. I think he just seems like this guy that you'd want to be your best mate, and you're buying into him being your friend. It's almost like he is the every person's friend. Like whether you buy his earpieces for your iPod, your iPad, the Marc by Marc, the Marc Jacobs.
His branding is so clever.
His branding basically feels like you're buying, oh, I've got to support him, he's a mate of mine. I don't know the man, but...
Do you think that's why, this is actually quite probably relevant to you, Dean, because of Dazed and Confused's audience, but do you think that's why sort of young people get so excited by it, because you can buy into it from when you're like 12, if you just buy a pencil?
And I think he does it in a really clever way, which doesn't cheapen what he does at all, because, you know, it's about music, it's about art, it's about film, it's about, you know, all these different things. And I think his company is a very human company in the context of fashion, you know, like, you know, when the statement that Robert Duffy issued about the show being late, you know, it was very human the way it came across.
Yeah, it wasn't arrogant like hell nightmare. And his live stream, you know, the way they do it, the way they have the pre-show and the way the camera moves around, and they do it for Vuitton as well. They are one slick machine.
It's so well done. Even the live stream, we were talking about this with the Vuitton, it zooms on the accessories and everything. Yeah, that's so tailored to a mass audience. It's not just tailored to people at the show.
Expert.
Should we have a look then?
Yeah, let's have a look.
Let's pray this works. Of course you can.
Okay, there's some like the thing.
Okay, we are going to have that little bit of the kind of red sun king at the start. I want to talk about this because I saw a really good tweet from Eric Wilson where he said that people were saying that this looks like different Instagram filters, which I thought was quite... It was making me think about that wit element again, because is he kind of making a play on, you know...
It's very switched on to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But also everybody does reference that now, you know, this could just be the, you know, the rising sun or something, but it's everybody likes
Everyone thinks it's an Instagram filter.
Put it back to social media.
I know, that's a bit worrying actually. It's a big round circle, I was like, it's Instagram.
There's other stuff apart from that.
But it gives that kind of sepia hue to everything, which seems kind of really relevant for Marc Jacobs, because he's always talked about as someone that references the past so much. So it's almost like he's playing on that idea of his own history as well, his own history with history. You see what I mean?
We've been talking a few times about referencing previous decades and how that's become quite. It's an exciting point where people are mishmashing decades together. People also referencing the 90s and stuff. Do you guys like it when people go like, you know, this is a 20s collection, this is a 60s collection, or do you think it's a bit?
Well, not too literally. I mean, we're not doing costume drama.
But he did it so literally
when
last
you
season.
mash it up.
And it still seemed really cool.
It was a modern thing. It wasn't like going to the Hollywood costume exhibition at the V&A. You could see that there was a modern idea.
Version,
Also, it's about why you're doing it. It's like why you're doing 20s at the moment and what you're going to tie that to.
Yeah. That's interesting, actually.
I think people tend to get really caught up as well with this idea of referencing the past and focusing on it too much as a negative thing, whereas that's something that's always been around in design history. Like, people always draw on the past. You know, like in the early 19th century, people were referencing ancient Greece, and it's, you know, it's not just a contemporary thing. I think people tend to associate it with a really sort of postmodern fragmentation kind of ideology.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's like it's always about the past, because, you know,
you have
that's
to be,
how the progression comes about. You throw a tangent and it becomes something else.
You have to be inspired by experience.
So what do you think of starting a show in a way that is a bit sort of, the focus isn't going to be hit the clothes? It's what you were talking about from, you know, if you're a buyer.
Well, he's focusing on a different, you know, you can focus on the textures, the silhouettes, the sort of overall shapes and line. And I think that's quite clever, especially after last season, that, you know, typical Marc, he's sort of like said, right, well, we're over that one. And actually fashion is meant to move fast, and, you know, now we're in this season, not last season.
I love it. It really is. It's like a piece of theatre, isn't it?
There's something about it being in the round as well. It's
And
quite
there being
peaceful.
so many girls.
Exactly. But also having all that space in the middle, so they're all centred on the outside, and actually that sort of dead space in the middle is quite peaceful and quiet.
And he's always flipped on his head. You know, he's starting with the walkthrough at the end. You know.
And it does work because there are so many different kind of metallics. It is about the texture, isn't it?
I love that hair.
Yeah, it reminds me, you know, I loved it when they did that at the Dior Couture show, when they cut all their hair so short and
Keep expecting one of them to be Stella Tennant.
Yeah, I know.
It's true, I kept thinking of someone.
This must be Guido, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Quite a few people, I was looking at the kind of Twitter reaction, and a lot of people saying, you know, that this is what fashion should be, and it's a real spectacle, it's a real piece of theatre. Do you think part of the reason it's so great to see something like this is just because the schedule is just so packed that people want to be surprised again, and anything that kind of...
Well, anything that stands out is always, you know, inspiring, but also I think although this is theatre, it's quite a calm theatre, it's quite a reassuring thing. It's not sort of dragging you across a trapeze or anything stressful. It's, you know...
It's making fashion feel otherworldly, which I think is always something when you see so many clothes.
It's drawing you into a moment.
Well, it's the opposite to that Victoria Beckham thing that you were saying, you know, straight down the catwalk, beautiful clothes, clean cut, kind of. You know, this is like the other thing, the spectacle.
But it does seem like the more that the like idea of the catwalk space becomes globalized with sort of digital technology, there does need to be that sort of theatrical element to it, because if it is just clothes, that's not that interesting to watch on a screen, you know, on the other side of the world, because you can't see the detail and you can't, you know, you can't really get to terms with it. Whereas this, you can kind of engage with it on a different level, I think.
So what do you guys
think? As a viewer,
that?
Again, not as a buyer. It's not that helpful for industry, but I think as a marketing exercise.
And this is what Marc's about, is what we were saying, isn't it? You know, it's pulling people in. But also, I think when you're in a position of a brand like this, I think a lot of this is about the might of Marc Jacobs. You know, he can do this. You know, no one's going to quibble and be like, I couldn't quite see that collar properly or anything like that.
Well, it's almost like there's the sun and they're all walking around the edge of the globe, and it's mildly symbolic of the sort of like the global power of him, that they're all the buyers and press sat in their various segments, and the sun, you know, they're all sort of like traipsing around the sun.
So let's talk about the clothes we're seeing. Let's talk about the shapes.
I mean, they're very luxe fabrics. I mean, for day wear, this is really luxe, high-end fabric.
Yes, incredible coats.
Beautiful cape cut.
And as you said, it's so flipped from last season, you know, with the opening look, it's like literally a t-shirt. To see something so opulent and so...
I love the furs, it's so beautiful.
Mildly terrified of those hot pants, but you can see they'll be really good to shoot. And
it's like that Vuitton collection he did a couple of seasons ago that had all those
I'm loving
those legs, are just insane.
It's interesting, we've talked about this in a fair few of our panels, is this idea that of stuff that is just super, super luxurious, and we were talking a bit about bespoke and the kind of stuff that people are actually going to spend their money on now, because, you know, it's a recession, people don't want to spend like £500 on just like a nice sweater, they want to buy something really, really amazing.
Yeah, well, when you look at the shoulders and the cut and the you know, the coats here are really luxurious cuts. I mean, there's something very reassuring about getting something in these colours or this sort of level of luxury fabric.
It's quite safe in that sense, you know, you mentioned the colour, it's very kind of, if you were doing a checklist for an autumn-winter collection, you know, you were like autumnal hues, like a nice sleeve, a good dress, it's quite...
But also if you did a checklist of want to feel nice, want it to be luxurious, he ticks those lists as well. Maybe not that one.
She's so amazing.
But it's nice to see something, you know, a bit... him do something fun and play different.
Lily down the catwalk.
You know, in a great tuxedo. I think, you know, he's got all the separates there, and I think he doesn't need, you know, okay, it's a bit of a theatrical set, but it's not so theatrical, and he doesn't need the bells and whistles to show how well he can cut.
Bits of this feel really familiar to me, but in a really good way, where it makes you feel like it's very contemporary and it's very relevant.
It's quite decadent, isn't it, with those beautiful rhinestones and furs and clutching your bags. It's so feminine.
The pyjamas.
Yeah, me too.
The idea of going out in your pyjamas, yeah, it's so...
I'm so tempted to do that this morning.
Yeah, me too.
Is it rhinestones? I don't think it is it? It's almost like this.
It's like almost like an iridescent weave, isn't it?
Beautiful. Yeah, I think it's a weave. And what do we think of the hair, the fact they've done it all matching?
It looks slightly different on each girl though. I think that's why I think it actually suits them all, because I think they've done a slightly different fringe or a slightly different sort of backcombing thing that actually suits them all individually. I think that's probably why it works.
Is this what you were expecting to see? Because Camilla, you said, you know, the day you go to Marc Jacobs Show and you get what you expect, it can be a bad day.
Well, yeah, I think if you get what you expect, it is a bad day, but I think what this is it's very reassuring. It's sort of signature Marc Jacobs, yet at the same time it's very new Marc Jacobs, which sounds like an oxymoron, but the way he does it is he has the shapes, he has the pieces, the coats, the jackets, the things that you can rely on, and then he injects a very new idea, say a lurex or you know, shot through. I mean, that shoulder and funnels is a new shape, and you know, he's got beautiful use of fabrics there. I mean, no wonder he wanted to wait to get the right bits in.
It's like he updates himself, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like he's got all his own sort of signature pieces, and then he does little touches to sort of update his own sort of original ideas.
So you know, I most want to shoot from this?
All of it.
All of it.
You know, that's why he has Sophia Coppola and all of those girls coming back every season after season, because this is a brand you can build on. You know, if you're shooting, you could mix this with a piece from another season.
And also why he has that huge sort of celebrity presence as well, that actually just, you know, beautiful women look beautiful in these clothes, because of what we were saying about the cut and the fabric, they're just sort of so elegant.
But it's also that great thing where, you know, much as these are obviously, it's not like a retiring look, maybe that kind of gold number, but they're not clothes that kind of wear the person. They still leave space for your personality, and they respect the wearer, which is quite a rare thing these days.
Yeah, it's true. Well, his stuff always feels really pared back. I know that's really strange to say, as you say, when we're looking at like this incredibly opulent fur, but it does always feel really simple. You know, it feels
but
like
it's like
a
those
very
beautiful sort of
idea.
belted coats. They're literally just sort of single-breasted belted sort of crop cashmere coats, but because they're so beautiful, like you said, it allows you to
everything
wear
that's
it
that
as you
easy. You
would.
could just throw it on and not be conscious of it.
I mean, even though this is sort of like dipped in shimmer, it isn't like something you would see on the Milan catwalk. I think sometimes with the red carpet, the designer's name is bigger than the actress's name, whereas here the actress's name would be bigger.
But it's all kind of labelless, those kind of dresses, like a really beautiful like metallic gown. It's not a new idea, you wouldn't look at it and go, that's instantly Marc Jacobs unless you worked in fashion, and I think that takes a very confident designer to do something that is kind of...
But it's interesting because then I think the cool factor comes in, and then if it's Marc Jacobs it's beautiful, but if it's Verity it's a bit, you know what I mean, it's a bit sort of old hat, whereas he does it in that way that is just cool.
There's something really comforting about it, I think, as a collection. It's a bit melancholic, but it's a bit like a comfort
It is slightly
blanket.
melancholic.
Oh yeah, because of the big planets.
And also there's no jewellery with anything, or no accessories really.
No accessories.
So it's kind of like this real kind of grand presentation of yourself, like the best you can be, but then stripped back.
Just to the clothes. Actually, that's really interesting.
Because designers get so het up on selling the bag, selling the this.
But there were a lot of bags in there, but they were done in a very natural way.
You believe them, don't you? She's throwing that kind of
it wasn't just
much and she's out.
Yeah.
So it's that girl.
I feel like someone's about to get sacrificed.
It's all right. Nobody gets hurt in a Marc Jacobs show.
And what does he wear when he comes out?
Well, that's always a little teller, isn't it?
I love to
the back of that.
Wow. By Marc Jacobs. It's quite brilliant.
I love how low the back scooped then.
Backs have been, we've said this in pretty much every panel we've done, it's really, really interesting to see how designers have just abandoned certain sort of like sexy zones of women, and they're just doing things like, the back and the midriff. No one's doing like boobs or legs anymore.
It's so peaceful, isn't it?
It's really relaxing. And also imagine if you've been out and about in the snow and then that huge red light. It's so comforting. It's like going back into the womb. Yeah. Lovely.
Well, also if you think of the speed of last season, this is quite...
Yeah.
Really beautiful.
Oh. Should we give him a clap?
It's in a pair of pyjamas.
So what's our...
That's a great look.
Oh, and the sun is setting now, is it? No. I thought
the sun is set on New York.
It's like the Teletubbies.
That was his reference.
Yeah, it was, clearly. That's what he's been taking his lead from. So what's our gut? Everyone seemed to really...
I think it was flawless, really.
Yeah. It didn't seem like a collection that's going to kind of move mountains. I don't think it's going to be one of those ones that in like 2 or 3 years people are like, oh, do you remember that Marc Jacobs collection? But do you think that's quite a good thing at the moment?
I think it's kind of that time. Do you know what? Because there's a lot of discussion about this thing with like, at the moment, Susie Menkes wrote that feature on New York Times about street style and how that's overtaken the show. And I think something like this is really nourishing and kind of reminding you, that there's another side to things and to kind of hang on.
That's where it comes from.
And not everything has to be gimmicky.
That is fashion at the moment, I think.
Yeah. So do you think this will kind of come to dictate what we're going to see for the rest of the season? Because for me this feels a little bit...
It's quite safe, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels safe.
I don't think it's safe. I think it's upping the game and it's saying it's all right to just focus on beautiful cut, finish and line.
Which is such a contrast to last season for him, because I love last season, but that did feel more in keeping with what Susie Menkes was kind of dismissing in her article, which is that
I agree.
That kind of gimmick. And if you wore that t-shirt, everyone would know it was a Marc t-shirt, whereas that felt a bit more...
But at the time, that it felt right, and he always has that thing of feeling right for the moment. Also, I kind of loved how mechanical it was. It was like bam, bam, bam. If you don't like that idea, you're not going to like the show. And I really like that kind of steadfastness, really.
It's like one opinion, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is the way.
He is the Marmite fashion designer of our generation.
It's a good quote. Tweet that.
Everybody loves it. I don't know. I think more people love him.
No, definitely.
It's interesting.
I think he treads a very clever line that he appeals to such a broad commercial, retail, editorial.
And it's quite multi-generational as well, isn't it? And even from like season to season.
I wanted to actually ask about that in the context of that collection, how it's really savvy. Actually, I was looking at it as it went along and I was like, that could appeal to who probably actually is his shopper, someone that can afford those clothes, who wants a good coat. But then all the young kids that are really interested in fashion will also like it because it was styled really nicely and it was really And I think that's quite, you see a lot of clothes where you're like, who's that going to work on? Who's going to actually wear that?
Buyers will go crazy for that. I mean, it's so sellable.
Yeah.
Those things.
So what are we looking forward to for the rest of the season? Because we've got London starting today. I don't want to detract from Marc, but...
Well, I think he finished New York on a very high note, and now today London's kicking off. So I think, you know, there's always lots to look forward to there.
What are you going to be your highlights?
We can't have a highlight until it's happened.
But there must be someone you're excited about.
I'm looking forward to Louise Gray, as always. I think she's kind of someone in the lineage of like Rachel Orban, you know, that kind of club wear influenced designer that's kind of really speaking to youth in the capital, and you know, kids love her stuff. She's you can't mistake her collection for anyone else's. It's very original. Really and also as well, you know, the St. Martin's show tonight. I'm looking forward to seeing who's coming up next.
It's going to be really good. It's very we've got our LCF panel after this, and we'll be talking about what makes London so different to New York. So it's very relevant. Great. Thanks, guys. Should we give you and Marc a round of applause to round
Definitely.